Welcome everybody to today's program. Another journey into urgency-based selling. Today's discussion is about wisdom and developing faster trusted advisor relationships. And if you have questions, we're going to have 5 to 10 minutes of questions at the end of our program. Now, often when we interact with prospects, they're not ready to buy. It can be frustrating. They actually request a quote and then they go radio silent on us. Now, why is that happens? Could be timing isn't right. Maybe they need to budget, so it has to come in the next budget year. But most likely we're a price check. The only reason they got a price from us is they were checking pricing. And they never really got to know us. Or maybe we sell a complex offering and it takes time for the prospect to process what we share with them. It might take an hour or more for us to share and talk through our offer. And the prospect's average attention span, if they're not looking for what we have, is 8 seconds. Maybe the prospect looks at our bullet points to ballpark our offer, but they really never get to know it. And for sure, we never mitigate their sense of risk. So as we process this issue, let's think about, did the prospect ever really get to know us? And did they know enough to make a buying decision? And then let me introduce a new idea, thinking minutes. Did we earn the right to thinking minutes? What are thinking minutes? Like, how long does it really take a prospect to consider our offer to make a decision? 15 minutes, 60 minutes? As a contrast, I remember once I was tracking how much time I spent on the phone following up with a prospect. In a 3-month period, I spoke to this one prospect for about 60 minutes. We talked about all kinds of things, including how their business is doing, how business is doing generally, their family. We had no thinking minutes. We had 0 thinking minutes, and there was no chance they were ever going to buy from us. So another way to frame this is, did we make the 3 sales we need to make? You know, the most important one is the salesperson sale. You have to convince them that you're an authentic, credible source of information. And if we do that, then we can make the offer sale and the company sale. Now, in my experience, I've been doing this for over 30 years. I've worked with over 170 clients. This is one of the biggest challenges, is we don't make the company sale, the risk mitigation sale. So they can't buy from us because all they have is a price, but they don't know us well enough to buy from us. So we need thinking minutes. Thinking minutes are high-powered minutes where they're actually processing what we have. Now, our moving towards being a trusted advisor both requires thinking minutes, and it also develops thinking minutes. Out of the process, we get thinking minutes. Now, from a motivational point of view, I've spoke with lots of people in the last 30 years that aren't fans of selling. They see it like this death of a salesman thing. Even salespeople who don't like selling. But I have never met anybody, particularly salespeople, who don't want to be a consultant, a trusted advisor. And this webinar is about how to get there faster through wisdom. So I offer as a model, when we're not a trusted advisor, the incumbent prospect is like at the top of a tilted soccer field. We're at the bottom. We're trying to kick the ball upfield, and that ain't so easy. And all they got to do is roll it downhill. In order for us to become a trusted advisor, we need thinking minutes. We need processing minutes. Because what we need to do is level the playing field, before experience. How do we do this? There are many ways. Today's seminar is about wisdom and your branding. Does your personal branding include you bring wisdom so that when you call or reach out to somebody, they may say to you, oh, Joe's calling, Jane's coming, great. They're bringing me wisdom. So even if prospects aren't ready to buy, they usually value wisdom. How do you prepare for each interaction? What wisdom are you bringing so that wisdom becomes an important part of your brand? And this is a way to become a trusted advisor before experience, before you actually supply them. So what is wisdom? In this context, it's short, insightful ideas. And the prospect can use the ideas immediately to improve their well-being, and it doesn't require them buying from us. Although we'd like to set it up, as you'll see, so that it leads to them buying from us. So how do you prepare wisdom so that in every sales call, you could ask yourself this question and answer it reasonably? What's the wisdom that I'm bringing here? Let's look at an example here of wisdom. The decision criteria. We're selling ad pages in physicians' journals. And the brand managers at pharmaceutical companies, their decision criteria is they usually only advertise in the top 10 best read publications. So there are readership scores. And our problem was at the time that we're typically ranked 10 to 20. So it was tough to get on most advertising schedules except for launches. So what was the wisdom that we brought that was a game changer? You should be advertising in a physician's journal that physicians keep near the computer when they do online research. And our compelling message was 30% of our clients keep our journal by the computer. What was the outcome? We got into a lot of additional conversations, and in a declining market, when the internet was driving down ad page sales, we had a 55% increase in 1 year in ad pages. And by the way, prices had also gone up. So we're looking to open a door in the prospect's mind with wisdom and to begin to earn thinking minutes. So the prospect may not allocate the time needed for a sales presentation, but they may just have 5-10 minutes for wisdom. Is wisdom part of your brand? Another example, billing and collecting for martial arts studios. Decision criteria. A heavy focus on price and price only was selling to the owner of martial arts studios. Our problem, we have a value-added program that costs 20% more than the competition. By the way, out of 170 clients, I would guess 95% of them were in this position. They didn't sell the cheapest product, but they had the best offer. What was the wisdom we shared that was a game changer? This is a high-risk business. 30% of businesses fail each year in this industry. So it's important for someone who owns a martial arts studio to look for risk reduction strategies. Our compelling message. With our value add program, failure rate is about 5% amongst our customers. That's an 84% improvement over the industry. By the way, how did we discover this? We had mailed out, mailings to customers, and there was a stack of returns. And when we counted them, they were 5%. And then we researched it and found it was 30% for the industry. What was the outcome? We initiated more serious conversations, and we doubled our closing ratio from 20% to 40%. Now, where does wisdom fall in the standard sales call if you have a process? Steps 1 to 7 set up the serious conversation. 8 to 12 are your fact finding. and 13 to 18 is managing and closing the opportunity. Now, 1 to 7 could take 3 minutes warming them up. So here's your wisdom right here. It's always been part of the standard sales call. And it aligns with one of the key motivators in Cialdini's book, Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion, with reciprocity. If you do something nice for another person, the average person is inclined to try to do something nice for you. And bringing wisdom is a sign of step 4, which is humility. We have to earn the right to each step of the process. And what we want is for them to listen to our splash, our quick, hard-hitting message. I gave some examples on previous slides, like 30% of our readers keep their journal by the computer when they search. That's the hard-hitting message. Now, the best kind of freebie or wisdom is a Trojan horse. A Trojan horse means that it's going to incent the prospect to buy your product. As we go forward, you'll see there are Trojan horse freebies built in. For instance, the one I just mentioned, 30% of our readers keep their journal by the bedside, by the computer rather, when they do research. That's a Trojan horse freebie. And in the case I offer at the end, you'll see how this works further. So there are 2 tracks when we're interacting and communicating with prospects. There's the selling track, where we're trying to create urgency, which is a compelling reason to act now. And then there's this consulting wisdom track. They're parallel to each other. And the discovery is that when someone doesn't want to buy from you for any of the reasons stated or other reasons, they may be willing to take wisdom for you. So you might ask, well, Andy, what is more important, wisdom or urgency? You know, there are 2 doors here. And in Collins and Poran's book, Built to Last, that's called a tyranny of the or, a tyranny of the or. Great companies, and by the way, wisdom helps you get to the urgency, but the idea here is that great companies that live a long time, they have an and, not an or. So there's an and. Now here's a personal experience in selling packaging using wisdom. So the decision criterion, and some of you may face this, is heavy weight is given to existing relationships. People like doing business with the people with whom they have relationships. So my problem was I had just started my business. I was a startup, which means a risky proposition. I had tough entrenched competition. Their product was better than mine, and it was a declining market. Pretty tough market condition. So what wisdom was a game changer for me, and it became the bedrock for developing this whole approach. The improved operation of their business. Mostly these folks were entrepreneurial owners. They weren't business school educated. I was. And so my compelling message was, I adapted my MBA learnings to the entrepreneurial model. They had a free sample of what I could offer. I advised them on how to run their business. They wanted more. And the outcome was, and it wasn't just this, because there were other parts to it, but this was an important part of the model I developed that led to 10x growth in 4 years. And it's part of the standard sales call. 75 weeks of wisdom. How often should we send? How much should we send? I had one prospect where I sent wisdom every week, and I had radio silence for 75 weeks. Think of this, a new idea every week. I finally got a call from the owner of the business, had about 300 employees, about, 80 salespeople. Said, Andy, I didn't read everything you sent, but what I read was good, and I have to think where there's smoke, there's fire. The outcome was an assignment to train 4 different teams of salespeople in different geographies. How long should we continue sending wisdom? As long as we see opportunity that's significant and we believe the prospect has a problem. You know, there's 3 kinds of knowledge. Type 1 is what you know, type 2 is what you know you don't know, and type 3 is what you don't realize you don't know. As long as we're bringing type 3 knowledge, I think we can continue sending information. Often we need to pierce the smoke screen of I'm good. The prospect says I'm good, but we really need to save them, and our type 3 knowledge, which is wisdom, is how we do it. Now, another reason why it makes sense to keep on sending wisdom is the typical B2B cycle is 3 to 12 months. And if we don't develop a relationship through something like wisdom, when they're ready to buy, we're going to face the ravenous wolf that's going to want to rip our throat out and get the best possible price. So that's why it's really critical to always sell with wisdom. Now, how do you get wisdom? Often from noticing clues from your years of experience. So do you have a clues noticing practice? Do you notice important clues around you? Here's an example. My wife and I were once hiking in upstate New York at this Montezuma National Wildlife Refuge. We found the bird blind and we saw there was some debris on the ground there. So we came closer and we saw there was a mess. Well, if you look straight ahead, you saw birds. If you look down, you saw the mess. But what happens if you look up and you notice the clue? There were 3 baby swallows that are near the ceiling of this bird blind. So do you have a clues noticing practice? This is a great exercise to do with your team. Do you have clues noticing practice? So the greatest way to get wisdom is from years of experience. But what if you're relatively new? What if you just started in the last year or two, the last few months? Well, your peers have wisdom. Ask your peers. And here's an easy one. Ask your customers. Ask them about their best practices. What accounts for their success? And if you do this with 10 of your big fans or customers, you're going to have wisdom to share with everybody with whom you talk. A strong use of wisdom in marketing. So if you're in the business of you're calling people and you're trying to make contact, send wisdom on day one. Could be an email, could be a phone call. How about a handwritten note? How many of you send handwritten notes? It's a great way to get positive attention and send wisdom. And then on day 3, 2 days later, call to discuss the wisdom. And you will get clues. If you get somebody on the phone because they're willing to discuss wisdom, you're going to get clues if they're ready to discuss business, especially when you let them know that your solution embraces the wisdom that you discussed. So it's kind of like a 2-step sale. The old definition of the 2-step sale was you make your first call for fact finding, and then you come back and you present a solution on the second call. But in a time where it's a little difficult to form relationships, the first step is becoming known as a source of wisdom. Webinars. Do you feature webinars? I've been offering free monthly webinars for over 30 months. I think some of you have come and visited here before. Come again, there'll be something new next month. You could use a webinar program to establish yourself as a source of wisdom. All right, let's look at a case history now that kind of pulls everything together and sets wisdom, and you could see how it closes the sale. So the prospect is a healthcare company, and we have a hotel, and so we have 300 to 400 room nights a year we're bidding on because the healthcare company, the pharma company, is sending their salespeople into the territory. So the background is for a year, nothing's happening. The prospect won't pay more, right? Because the prospect says a bed is a bed and our hotel costs 50% more a night. We're not paying that. Well, if the only important closing condition is price, we can't win because we're not the cheapest. So we need to add a condition for making a decision through wisdom. So after I had done the training and the preparation, the salesperson calls the buyer and challenges the decision maker. When the buyer says, "Why are you calling me? It's all a matter of price. You don't have the lowest price," the saleswoman says, "I'm surprised to hear you say that." So bold behavior is an important part of this process. A business seller will challenge the prospect's thinking, a social seller won't. because the social seller just wants to make friends. So the buyer says, why are you calling? It's all price. And the saleswoman says, what about a good night's sleep? And now she shares type 3 knowledge, wisdom. Sleep deficit is a performance killer. This is a Harvard Business Review article, and it turns out we have a great program when it comes to a good night's sleep. It's not just the mattress, it's all kinds of things. But he still didn't buy. You know, maybe, so the saleswoman, does she call it a day? No. Maybe it takes some time, some thinking minutes. So now we send some hard-hitting messages because we're trying to get the buyer to change their perspective from first cost to cost in use. Some of you may have that issue. And there's an economic justification. What's more important? Save $10, $20, $30 on a room, or have a well-rested sales team in the field that can have a higher closing ratio. On day 5, we sent the GM letter. That's where the leader of the unit, the VP of sales, the GM, the president, sends a supporting letter to the prospect. So what's the recap? No progress for a year. Call and challenge the prospect. Send type 3 wisdom on sleep. This is critical to the breakthrough. Send the productivity splash. Send the GM letter. What happened? On day 5, after receiving the GM letter, we get a call from the prospect. Now they're serious. We call that a PIK, a payment in kind. It's what the prospect does to show they're committed. What was the outcome on day 6? We closed the deal. They paid 50% more. They agreed that a good night's sleep made a difference. Wisdom was the driver here. Now, the moral of the story is not that you could close every deal in 6 days or get 50% more. The moral of the story, I believe, is this deal probably could have closed at any time in 6 days. So we're near the end of our webinar. We're going to do takeaways. I'll announce my next webinar, and then we have a few minutes for questions. Selling and wisdom, it's an and, not an or. When prospects don't want to buy, they still may have time for wisdom. So what is the wisdom that you bring to each meeting? How do you prepare? Sources of wisdom include experienced team members and big fan customers, and cultivate a clues noticing ability. Well, we all know Rome wasn't built in a day, so we're going to have a few minutes for questions in just 30 seconds. So you might want to think about what your takeaways were, if any, and what can you change in your practice immediately. In our next webinar on 12/15, we're going to talk about the harder to close prospect. So there's the easy to close and the hard to close. And what we experience or find is that the easy to close prospect causes us to tailor our selling to that easy to close prospect. And as a result, it's a train wreck with the harder to close prospect. And our pipeline, if we're in a business with a pipeline, tends to be chock full of harder to close prospects. Okay, we have a few minutes for questions. And if you want me to send you some more information on wisdom, send me an email afterwards. Here's where you could reach me. But are there any questions about today's seminar? Any questions and any comments about wisdom? Here's a question. I close sales all the time without any of this wisdom stuff. Is it really important to have wisdom? And my answer ties into our seminar for next time, which is you probably don't need wisdom with the easier to close prospect. You have a relationship, you have recurring revenue. I don't see how it could hurt you to solidify and cement that relationship, but it's mostly for the developing relationship. And there are 3 places for business development. We usually think mostly about opening a new account, but here are 2 more. What if you're selling A to somebody, but not B? In other words, you have another piece to your offer. That requires business development. And then what if you split the business? The other guy or gal has 50%, you have 50%, and you want to go to 75-25. Anytime you want to change the status quo, I would submit to you, you need the techniques of urgency-based selling and you need wisdom. Next question. I'm in a churn type of environment. I pound the phones all the time. I don't think I have time for this wisdom stuff. My comment to you would be, if you have any kind of script, you want to embed a sentence of wisdom in there so the prospect knows it's worth talking to you. Last question I'll take. Are people really thoughtful? Do they really care about wisdom? Well, you know, the question is implying that most people or many people don't care. You're probably right. So this is for the ones who do care. And I kind of think you're going to want to deal with these people. They're going to be easier to close and better prospects. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for joining us. It was a pleasure to see you. If you have any questions, here's where you could reach me, Andy G at urgencybasedselling.net. Visit our website, urgencybasedselling.net. Our next webinar is December 15th. We look forward to seeing you next month. Have a great day.